When I was idling through my collection of photographs, feeling not particularly inspired, I have to say, until I came across this picture and I thought, oh, I've got to paint that. So, well, I guess I'll paint it. I don't know whether it'll succeed or not. It's quite a complex, well, it's quite a multi-phase painting, I suppose we could describe it as. It's going to involve a lot of levels of masking fluid, methinks. So, off we go. Look, a decent sort of colour. It's not an indecent colour. Maybe darken that a little bit in there so I don't have to do quite as many layers of masking fluid. I don't know whether it'll help or not. Let's find out. This is going to be paint, dry, mask, dry, paint, dry, mask, dry for quite a while. Anyway, we'll see how it goes. So here comes the dry phase. I think it's fairly dry. And now we mask the lightest leaves on this particular tree. And one of the things that will or should separate out one tree from the next is, although you won't see the shapes of the individual leaves, the type of texture that the leaves of that tree produce will come through. So it's worthwhile trying to distinguish between one tree and another. Using the masking fluid to change the leaf shapes, and of course the leaf colours from one tree to another will be different as well. So we have another tree shape over on the right hand side. This time I'm not trying to produce the such a yellow colour as the tree on the left, and towards the background we have more bush This being New Zealand, of course, we don't have woods, we have bush. Some of that's light coloured, some of it's dark, but we'll put in a preliminary wash across the back, which is going to be darkened. Later. And it's going to be lightened now, so put in some lighter area there, and a darker area there, although this may not be the most sensible thing to do, because I want, if there are areas in this foreground tree on the left hand side that have leaves, or gaps between the leaves, I'll need to be able to see this dark colour behind them, which means I'll need to wait until this masking fluid has dried. What else can we do at this stage? I guess we can put in some dark underneath this tree. Hopefully I've avoided the masking fluid and bits of the dark colour that are visible behind. Windsor red plus Windsor blue makes a pretty good dark. Since I happen to be running low on my my go-to dark, which is neutral tint, so that is deep shadow in underneath there. Ooh, large drop of water up there misbehaving, which I can't do anything about with that brush because it's all full of wet. So let's pick up a bit of green. If I can use that bloom to do something with. Probably could, you know, if I was a real painter. See if we can dunk a bush in it. There we are, that'll do as a first approximation to a bush. Now, what have I got on this? It's sort of greenish colour, isn't it? There's a fair amount of more or less flat greeny colours. In this region of the painting, so it goes over right over there into the there's rocks around here, fairly dark coloured. So I get the water melding in with the colours of the rocks. Let's put some more rock over here and maybe a little bit there. Maybe there. Pick up some more green. That was not really what we wanted, was it? I'm doing this without thinking, and I think I need to do it with thinking. The trouble with the white water is that it's not actually white. All sorts of varieties of colour. More rocks there. And on either side, just to give us some sort of continuity, I think. Can't say I'm very enamoured of what that bush is doing up there. It's supposed to be painting itself, but it's not really doing anything very exciting, is it? Area where there's a bit of white water at the bottom of that. So, see if we can put in some rocky shapes in amongst all this water. So I'm trying to generally show these dark rocks on either side of where there's a little waterfall, just to indicate that the water is falling over these rocks. And then down here we've got the white water slowly becoming flatter. Well, as is often the case, I've gone down very close to the part of the paper that's going to be underneath the frame, so whether or not people will see it is another question. There might be a bit of rock going across there. We've got a fair amount of rocky shape going in that area. Let's put some rock down there and just use the bring the green in to soften that. Now, I mean, as the small just take advantage of that. Those white areas to suggest that there's more places where there's water coming down over the rocks. And just try to soften the tops of those dark wet areas, just to try and blend them in a bit with the rest of the painting. That'll probably suffice for that. And I was going to put a freshet in, a little waterfall in there, but I seem to have not done so. So let's get rid of that light area. Alright, that stuff up there is dried, so let's turn our attention back up to the tree region. But since we've got 1 minute and 33 seconds, I'll turn the camera off and turn it on again. So back to 29 minutes of recording time. So we're going to go back up to this tree and add more leaves. So I was worried about the need to put dark green in underneath this tree, and of course the other alternative is to do what I've just done there, which is to put some masking over the dark and then darken the dark a bit more, so that means that those leaves will, well, they won't be quite as bright as the first ones that I masked, but they will certainly be lighter than the darkest dark. I'm trying to produce a slightly pendulous appearance to these leaves, which I kind of forget from time to time. Alrighty, now we're doing some more leaves on the other side, which I want to have a different general appearance from the ones over on the left, so that whereas the ones on the left are all more or less facing in the same direction, I'm going to do these leaves as clusters that are there's probably a word for all pointing in the same direction, but I'll use the phrase all pointing in the same direction to mean that. Well, actually I don't mean all pointing in the same direction, I mean all pointing in different directions, but they're all part of a cluster. There you are. So I guess they're at the ends of branches. You can tell I'm a botanist, can't you? It's probably a technical term that I have absolutely no idea of. Oddly enough, this first layer of paint has dried in a whole lot of little leafy shapes, or leaving a whole lot of little slightly lighter leafy areas. So I'm saying, well, if that's the way that it is, let's take advantage of that. No point in wasting a good leafy structure, is there? Okay, so that's given us a bit more leafage over on the right. Let's actually put some in down a bit lower, down here somewhere. And I should really have brought the water over as far as the tree, because we're going to get an edge, aren't we? Look, see, there we are, an edge. Really, where I don't want one. I'll probably end up having to disguise that. Although heaven only knows how. Probably by darkening it. Which I don't particularly want to do with this brush. I should have used another. Rather than putting dark paint into something that I've been using for a light area. But it's too late now. In fact, I may end up putting more tree over there, I don't know. Oh, what am I going to do with this bush? I suppose I could try blotting it a bit, couldn't I? A little help will make it worse. Make it worse is the answer. Should have stopped. All right. Well, let's just hope that that's not going to worsen any more. And here's the other way of doing leaves, which is to spray your blush out, get paint all over your fingers, and do a bit of careful splotting. So I don't want that all to be dark, 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 so let's add some lighter paint to the brush and do a bit more splaying if we can. Brush is now too wet, it doesn't want to splay, and it's got enough liquid on it so that it's not producing nice little droplets. It's just covering large areas with paint. That's more the sort of effect that I was after. I don't want it particularly light. Sorry, particularly dark. I wanted that to be a lighter tree in the background. Ah, no. This one's darker though. This brush, when you want it to clump together, it all splays out, and when you want it to splay, it all clumps together. Maybe I'll try something else. One of my rigger brushes. Oh, it's over there that I'm working, isn't it? Yeah, I thought so. There's not enough paint in it. It's neither one thing nor the other. So let's bide our time. What's that? Instead, turn our attention down here. So we'll put in a big rock on the side of the stream. And we'll try to give that some shape. With a credit card. And just add some more. So let's have that lighter edge going around the corner there. And oh, it's a huge rock over here as well. Blocking off the corner of the painting for us. So it's going to have a light top to it with some structure of some sort. There we go. It's looking kind of rockulous. I think that's a term that the geologists use, isn't it? Rockulous. So you do something sort of random and then you try and pick out things that suit the object that you're painting well. So there are various slightly darker lines in this rock that that look like fissures, so I'm trying to pick them out. Fissures in the rock, not people with fishing rods. I might try and do something like that on the other side as well, but that rock has dried out too much to be able to do anything with it. without putting more wet paint on. I think that sort of defines it a little bit better, and see if we can do the fishery thing as well. Another thing you should be able to do, and I sometimes manage it, sometimes don't, where the light turns direction, so where it goes from being light to being dark, the light tends to pick out the shadows and things. So when it's sort of directly incident, you tend to illuminate the whole area approximately evenly. Where it's in darkness, of course, it's shadowed, but where it turns from one shape to the other, you tend to pick up all the texture. And I have to say, I often forget that particular dictum. But it is a true statement. I think that was kind of at the back of my mind when I was introducing some of these fishery type shapes, that we were getting detailed texture in the rock where it was going from one state of litness to another state of litness. Various areas of wet paint all over the place at the moment. Now, kind of getting towards the middle of the painting. There are areas of rock that are providing the mechanical start, as it were, to an array of little waterfalls. So there's lots and lots and lots of them, all cascading over this, I suppose it's a rock bank. And there's rock showing through the water, so it's really where the rock shows through the water that we get the shape of the waterfall. It's not specifically the water that we're seeing so much as the colours of the rock underneath, indicating I'm doing two things at once, into locking two things. One is that I'm trying to, having produced all these lumps of rock that the water is falling over, I realise that they're all more or less coming to an end at the same point, which is where the surface of the pool is, that I'm going to have to draw in. So they all need to come to a sort of more or less flat bottom here. Me, let's go a bit faster. Put a whole lump of paint down all at once. And the other thing is that I'm allowing the rock to show through the water, and that is what's making this look like a row of waterfalls. So we're getting into fairly dark over on the left hand side here. And maybe we'll allow that more or less triangular shaped piece of rock not to go all the way down, because we'll add another one down here so that we can say that there's well, one waterfall coming down here, and another one coming down here, so kind of obscuring the bottom of that triangular shape. So what we're doing up here, we'll have to have water rushing down there. And I guess the same sort of thing happening on here, because the rocks will be more or less consistent in their shape, since they're all part of the same formation. Now, I think perhaps I need to modify the triangular shape a bit. And there's broken shapes up there that have water spilling over them in all sorts of directions. So I'm going to see if I can get away with just indicating the shapes without a great deal of specific portraiture going on. I mean, these rocks down here I've indicated specifically. Oh, 1 minute 12 seconds to go, so camera's off and then on again. Well, I'm not quite sure what happened there. The camera just stopped about 1.5 minutes into the recording. I'm not sure why, because the battery says that it's full and the SD card says that it's not full. So what caused it to stop, I don't know. And, well, tell me if it stops again, would you please? Oh, but you can't. I just have to keep an eye on it, won't I? Now, there's a whole area over here that's got a lot of water coming down, so there's not a lot of rocks explicitly visible as we see further to the left. Put in a bit of solid rock there, and then we can have a go at a larger area of waterfall over here on the right hand side. So you tend to get bits of rock showing through near the top of the waterfall, not so much in the middle, and then there's a bit down here where the water must be hitting something and coming down again from there. Maybe we need to verticalize some of this rock face, because otherwise we can end up with the water going all sorts of odd horizontal directions. I've got a fair amount of rock face up here that the water is tumbling down in various places, just not really structured. All that precisely. Oh, there is one fairly clear waterfall up here, so we'll give it a good clear piece of, or pair of rocks to come down between. At some stage I think I'll put in some green in this area to indicate slightly stiller water in between one set of waterfalls and next. I could be using this broad brush, of course, but it tends to put down a solid area of paint, and I'm trying to reduce sort of broken edges, dry brush effect, to indicate this mixture of water and white water and dark rocks. Actually, I think I'll make those rocks taller. Let's see if we can do the dry brushy thing a little bit, just to speed it up a little bit. Oh, that's getting more of the sort of mixture of lights and darks that I'm after. So we're picking up the texture underneath. And then there's even more rocks further up that have still more water. Coming down them, but I'm not going to do those explicitly, I don't think. Oh. Apparently I am. Let's call that a rest. No, I was going to put some more green in, wasn't I? I promised, threatened, suggested. So we've got whitish water areas. There's going to be one big one around that big waterfall, isn't there? And then you need to soften some of those areas a little bit, pick a lot of colour from the larger pool of colours. Well, attempt to, it's not doing much of a job, is it? There we go. And over to that other large pool of colours that we call the palette. It's getting pretty dark over there, and indeed over here, so it's a little bit of dark gunge in there, and just some other things to horizontalise the structure a little bit, and we'll just see if I can soften those edges where they didn't work very well. I've left it for a bit too long by the look of it. Where the edges of the white water are, I want to just try and knock the green back a bit. And I think this... two large fingerprints which we do not want in the middle of the pool. No, I was going to try to darken some of this area. Because these waterfalls are very light at the moment. So just try to darken them a bit. I mean, they are the highlight, literally, of the painting, but also want the painting to be consistent. Rock there that the water is dropping over. So I wanted that to be a big waterfall, so I might as well make it a big waterfall, mightn't I? Alrighty. Now I was going to put some green up in the water there. Maybe not very much over there where it's all a bit agitated. Right, maybe a bit of darkening in some of these rocks. This dark paint is in fact dark enough. You can never be sure, it always changes so much when it dries. Sometimes it just goes black as black, and sometimes it doesn't. And you end up with this dull colour. And I've also got a terrible tendency, which I think other people have as well, when I'm trying to darken something to give it some texture, I want to darken the already dark areas so that they stand out against the slightly lighter areas. But what I actually do is behave like a house painter to try and even out the tone and paint the dark over the light areas rather than the ones I want to darken. It's the wrong thing to do. And I also want this all to be getting pretty dark over here anyway, because it's very shaded. And same thing with this bit of water. It's not getting a lot of light. So even at the bottom it's not terribly bright. The other thing is that the water that's falling down is vertical, and therefore it's not receiving as much light as the water at the bottom. So it ought not to be as light. But I might just wait till later and see whether or not I want to put a very pale grey wash over it, although having said that, I am at the moment darkening it, aren't I? So maybe I'll I've painted on really the wrong side of the paper. There's just a hint of too regular a texture in that waterfall. All right. Let's leave the water for a while and go back to trees, shall we? So we're going for something a bit darker. Well, it doesn't have to be an even wash though. It's just and the brush strokes themselves can have some texture. There's no reason why they shouldn't. Don't know why I've left this little bit unpainted. There's no... Oh, maybe there was going to be even more waterfall there, I don't know. Integrate that bush, which didn't ever really work, in with the rest of the colour. Drying time, I think. Alright, back with you again. Seem to be having problems with the camera this evening. It's stopped at unexpected times more than once. So I said the battery is still charged, and it said the SD card is not full. So neither of the standard reasons for it stopping was pertinent, so I don't know quite why it was doing that. Anyway, I've emptied the SD card and I've replaced the battery with the spare battery, so hopefully if it was lying about either of those things we will have cut it off at the pass, as it were. But, well, I guess we'll see. What I should be doing now is not darkening the rocks in the waterfall, but darkening the trees, since I've put another layer of masking fluid on, so we should be getting to some pretty dark leaves now. So I think maybe the colour that I've just been picking up is maybe even not dark enough. So we'll try to darken it some more. And still call it green. I don't know that that's still green, but well, we'll pretend it is all the same. What it certainly is very wet. I don't necessarily want a really wet brush. I want to convince these bristles to stay apart, and when they're wet they tend to clump, of course. Through mutual attraction of the water molecules, but we'll see what happens. So that tree is one that I'm darkening at the moment, is in behind this lighter tree. So there will be bits of that dark showing through the light area there, and whatever it is that's underneath here, whether it's rocks or something or other, it's going to show through, especially at the edges of this light tree. So hopefully that's given some depth to that tree, and now let's try and lighten up the colour just a smidgen, so that we can go over here and do something similar by darkening the background of this area. So there's no rocky shapes behind here that are showing through. I just want some feeling that the tree itself is not all catching the light to the same extent, so try and darken in the bottom section here. Alright. And maybe a little bit of judicious darkening in this region. And possibly also in this very light piece of bush. I don't want to have a path out of the painting for the viewer's eye. I want them to be trapped there forever. So let's just darken that a little bit. Righty-ho. Just sitting here looking at various bits of the painting. I just want to try to produce some structure to this falling water here. Now, there's some variation, or there should be some variation in colour in the water that I haven't really got at this stage, so I'll just see if we can introduce some darker and lighter areas to the water. I don't want a light area in the water right underneath the rocks on the left hand side here, so let's get rid of that lightness and generally go back and forth, just darkening things like I would with a graphite pencil if I was doing a drawing. a few places where the water is catching the light that I don't really want it to. And over here I think also we want to have water that's in shadow. So using so-called dry brush technique, which is when the brush is not full of enough liquid to produce a pool of paint on the paper, but just catches the tops of the bumps on the paper. So I'm putting paint on the palette and then just removing a little bit. Maybe not quite as much as that needs to be removed. There we are, that's about right, I think. And it's possible that that may read as a rock, but that's entirely fine. Fair amount of shade from the trees on the right hand side there. That's not quite dry brush, is it? But again, there's a fair amount of shade from the trees on the right hand side, so it's perfectly fine. It's kind of blending in with some of the rocks on the riverbed. Of course, the other way I could be doing this is to mix up a batch of green paint and darken it, and then apply it with a bigger brush rather more rapidly than by this technique. This gives me a certain amount of control over what I'm doing, that provided I keep my eyes open, should allow me to control the darkness of this area. So I want it to be reasonably dark towards the back. Except for those areas where the white water is, of course. But part of the reason for darkening quite a large area of this big pool of water is to get a reflection, a lighter colour that corresponds to the reflection of the large area waterfall, which I just forgot to put in before. Quite like this texture in the water. All right. Now I think perhaps the time has come to apply some sandpaper. So if I want some light coloured reflections in here, I mean, I've darkened a lot of the rest of it, but let's just maybe I'll do them in this direction. And that should just about do what we want. Remembering that this paper that I'm using has on this side a very definite grain, so you can see this pattern emerging, which I don't really want, but we can peck away at with a knife and just try to disguise it a bit. There we are, that's just taking the surface layer of paint off. Some of those hollows where the sandpaper hasn't reached. Right, that'll do. Doesn't have to be a lot, I don't think. And where are we up to? What did I just do? I last painted there, didn't I? I didn't apply masking fluid, and that paint is still wet, so let's dry it. And I think at that stage we might try taking the masking fluid off. And while doing that, I think I've just realised that I want to darken these rocks at the back a little bit, so we can, if I can get it right, I'll be able to suggest that the colour that's there already is the colour of the water. And that there's a bunch of other little waterfalls even further up, which I don't think is apparent at the moment. So, do you think that I need to darken that water? I think I do a little bit, but very little bit. I might just rely on the tail end of whatever paint happens to be in the brush at the moment. Knocked back all of that vertical section there, and I'll now try to bring some of it forward again. So that, I think, gives us the three-dimensionality that was lacking. It's coming in under the trees, and I want just a bit of variation between the vertical parts of the water there and the part at the bottom that's all churned up. So let's wet that and then just knock it back a smidgen. Alright, I'm getting quite a feeling of light at the top of those little waterfalls. I'm not sure that this is blended in quite well at the bottom. A definite feeling of the water fall ends here. That seems to require a bit of darkening to form more or less horizontal line at the bottom. That's helping a bit too, I think, isn't it, to define those pools of agitated water at the bottom. Don't particularly want that to stand out as much as it is at the moment. Maybe I'll put in a bit of it's not working, is it? Dark green is what I was hoping for, but it's just coming out as very, very dark, so we'll make that part of the surface of the pond. Alright, mask off time. That's what they say to Zorro when he gets home at night. Okie dokie, I've removed all the masking fluid, set the painting up at the other end of the room to have a little bit of a look at it, and decided a couple of things. One is that this is a very obvious skirt on the end of this, on the edge of this tree, so I'll just randomise the edge of the tree a bit more, and apparently the internal part of the tree as well. The second one is that I've discovered there's a scratch mark, as it were, of light paint there, which is survived unscathed through multiple layers of other things, so let's just get rid of that. And the third thing is that I feel as though I ought to have something lighter up there, but I'm not sure that I can do anything very much about it. So I might just put it up at the other end of the room again and see if it, having changed these other a couple of things, whether or not that still annoys me. A bit of depth to this tree at the bottom where the things are in shadow, shall we? And maybe up there, feels as though those leaves are just a little bit more shaded. Maybe those ones as well. The other thing I should do in there, of course, is to put in some branches. Trees don't, or tree leaves don't exist on their own. They need some support, so let's put in a bit of support. With some darker so I don't know how much time I'm going to get out of this. The spare battery turned out not to be charged, and the original battery I've put in may only last for a minute or so, but I've taken a photograph for safety reasons, as it were, and we'll just see. Anyway, so I've put the some branches in there, and I think we're pretty much done. So thank you for your patience with me this evening as we've dealt with various problems with the camera, and slightly longer painting than some of the other ones. and we'll catch you next time. Good night.